The woman arrived at the funeral of her beloved. During the farewell, unexpectedly for everyone, a sound came from the coffin, and smoke began to billow out. I kindly ask you to listen until the end, give a thumbs up, and subscribe to the channel, as your attention helps the channel grow and allows me to create new and interesting stories. Thank you. After graduating from university, John's affairs were going well. Initially, he got a job as a manager at a construction company, and a year later, he was already the head of a department. Then, he bought an apartment, a car, and it was time to think about a family. Moreover, John had a beloved girlfriend. He had been friends with Isabella since high school, and they both came from a small town. Back then, Isabella was studying at a pedagogical university, and now she was working at an ordinary school. They started living together while they were still studying at the university. John's and Isabella's parents were old-fashioned in this regard, and every time the lovers visited their hometown of Simsville, they would always say, "It's wrong to live together before marriage." Isabella only smiled. Of course, deep down she agreed with the parents. It was time for them to get married. But a perfect wedding required money, so John was saving up while also acquiring a car and an apartment. That's how they lived. And then one day, John made a decision. It was time. On that day, he invited Isabella to a restaurant. He didn't say why, but Isabella had a suspicion. She had accidentally found a ring in John's pocket and was anticipating something. He called her from work. "Honey, I'm sorry. The boss gave me urgent work. I'll be an hour late. You sit there, have a cocktail, and wait for me." "Well, I don't know," Isabella joked. "I might order more than one cocktail." "Who said anything about an alcoholic one?" John laughed. "Drink some juice. I'll be there soon. I love you." "I love you too, darling." They trusted each other, and if John was late, it meant he had no choice. Isabella would wait. Isabella was sipping a non-alcoholic cocktail at the table when she suddenly heard a surprised exclamation. "Friend, is that you?" In the next second, a slim blonde, Catherine, flopped into the chair at Isabella's table. "Oh, Catherine," Isabella was surprised. They had studied at university together. "What a meeting!" "Yeah, I'm here on business," Catherine smiled. "I see you're sitting here, waiting for your husband." Isabella nodded. "Husband is delayed at work." "Now I'm waiting." "Husband? So you finally married your John?" "Well, not exactly." Isabella hesitated a bit. "But soon everything will change." "I see," Catherine smirked. Isabella pretended not to notice this smirk. In principle, Catherine had never been Isabella's friend. They just interacted during their student years. Isabella noticed how Catherine looked at John like a cat at a mouse, but John never paid any attention to her. Later, Catherine disappeared from sight, and now she reappeared. Isabella gently hinted that tonight she and John had a romantic date in the restaurant, but Catherine seemed to miss the point and continued chatting. At this moment, John burst into the restaurant with a huge bouquet of roses. "Isabella, my dear, forgive me." He hugged his girlfriend. Isabella smiled back and kissed her beloved. Meanwhile, Catherine continued to sit at their table. "Hi, John," she said. John, who didn't immediately recognize who was sitting next to Isabella, was a bit surprised and embarrassed. "Catherine, hi. Didn't expect to see you. Thought I'd never see you again in my life." Catherine laughed, fluttering her eyelashes at John. "Catherine, forgive me, but we wanted to spend time alone," Isabella finally said. She was already tired of this familiar's intrusiveness. "I won't bother you," Catherine laughed. "Right, John. I didn't bother you before?" "Catherine, stop," John muttered, puzzled, looking at Isabella. But then Catherine continued, "We had quite a good time during our university years. Remember when you went to visit your parents for a week in the 5th year? Your mum was ill or something, right, John? We had a good time back then." Catherine beamed a smile. John turned crimson, and Isabella looked at them in shock. "So, you cheated on me, John? You always said you loved only me." "Isabella, don't listen to her," John replied, distraught. "It was just one time, but what a time, John." Catherine smirked again, stretching like a cat. "All right, I'll go," she said, standing up. Isabella, tears streaming down her face, looked at John. Such a surprise. John could barely get over the shock and was silent for a while before he began explaining, saying that one time Catherine came over when he was too drunk to recall anything, celebrating a friend's birthday. But it was the only time, and I don't remember a thing. "Spare me the details," Isabella cried. "I don't want to hear anything or see you anymore." In vain he tried to hold her back, to convince her. That same evening she packed her things from John's apartment and left. John even knelt, but Isabella was like stone. If only he had told me everything back then, Isabella thought, but John kept silent all this time, always showing as if Catherine meant nothing to him. And now it turns out it was all true, and they made a fool out of me. That's how their relationship ended. One day, John saw someone meeting her after work. He gave her flowers and kissed her. John didn't want to watch further. He turned around and walked away. Several weeks passed, and suddenly Catherine reappeared in John's life. She found his number and called him. She asked to meet. "John, I'm sorry for that scene in the restaurant," she said when they met. "But when I saw you, I forgot everything. Besides, I felt sorry for you." "Sorry?" John was surprised. "Yes, exactly. I saw how much you loved Isabella, and she had other men. I know this for sure." "You're talking nonsense," John got angry. "You don't want to believe me, but it's true. I kept silent before and would continue to do so. But that night I realized you were going to propose to her. And just the day before that, I saw her with another man at another restaurant. They were kissing. That's your modest Isabella." John said nothing. Maybe Catherine was right. After all, he saw Isabella kissing another man himself, and such resentment gripped his heart. It turns out he hadn't noticed any infidelity for so many years, and Isabella turned out to be unfaithful. That night, John lost himself, and in the morning he woke up in his apartment in bed with Catherine. "Good morning, darling," she smiled. "I'll make you a strong tea. It will clear your head." "Catherine." He stopped her by the hand. "I'm sorry, I don't remember anything, just like the last time. But I remember everything. It was wonderful." Catherine laughed, kissed John, and slipped out of the bed. Lying there, John thought, maybe it's for the best. Catherine, she's very good and loves him, and Isabella, let her live as she wants. Soon, Catherine moved in with John. When his parents found out he was living with another woman, they initially started scolding him. But then, when he told them what Isabella had done, they even understood their son and quarreled with her parents. Isabella's parents were very hurt for their daughter. But what could be said, let the young ones decide themselves. Where Isabella was and with whom did not concern John anymore. He now had Catherine. Soon they got married. Did John love her? No, but he was comfortable with Catherine. Moreover, the stunning beauty looked very advantageous with him at all social events. Everyone ogled Catherine. She, on the other hand, truly loved him. John had no doubts about her love. Several years passed. During this time, John became even more successful in his work. Every vacation, he and Catherine traveled abroad, rested at prestigious resorts. John said, "It's time to have a baby." Catherine agreed and sighed heavily. Something wasn't working out, but she never went to the doctor. She generally had other priorities. After marrying John, she immediately quit her job at a municipal school on the outskirts of the city. John wanted to arrange a place for her at a prestigious lyceum, but Catherine was offended. "You want me to be bogged down with stacks of notebooks and stupid students?" John thought, "Indeed, don't we have enough money? I'll earn for everything by myself, and my wife should be beautiful and happy." Only it was time to have a child. Moreover, his parents were already outright yelling, "Son, we want grandchildren. Your former Isabella has already given birth long ago." His mother once said, The boy is already in school. So, she didn't take long to get over me, John smirked. Got pregnant right after leaving me. I wonder by whom. I don't know, she's not married, his mother answered. Lives in the city, works somewhere in a school. John, suddenly said his mother, could it be your child? It's not my child, John replied sharply. If it were mine, she would have said. She got pregnant, probably not knowing from whom. Almost 10 years had passed, and it still pained John to think about Isabella. So, she has a child. Let her live with her child, thought John. A single mother. She got what she deserved. And a year later, John started noticing that Catherine smelled more and more of wine. He would come home, and his wife was evidently drunk. Arguments started. John demanded that Catherine pull herself together, reminded her about the child, but she only snapped back. John finally realized that he married a hollow doll who cared about nothing but his money. Let's get a divorce, John said during another argument. Divorce? Catherine was indignant. Then we'll have to fight over the property. What property? John exclaimed. I earned all this. But with me, Catherine answered indignantly, so I have a right to half. John was stunned by such audacity. Half? No, of course, I won't throw you out without a cent, but half is too much. The court will decide everything, Catherine said, and left the house. A week later, while John was preparing the divorce papers, Catherine called him. She was crying, John, I understand you're very angry with me, but I couldn't help calling you. I desperately need your help, she sobbed. What happened? John asked. Despite everything, he had been used to worrying about her for so many years. I went to a neighboring town, Catherine continued. I have relatives there, you know, and I felt unwell. Something happened. What's wrong with you now? John exclaimed. John, I'm pregnant and there's a risk of miscarriage. I'm lying here, afraid to move. I'm coming, John shouted into the phone. Catherine is pregnant, finally. John jumped into the car and rushed to the neighboring town. Catherine's aunt, the only relative, lived there. John had never seen this aunt. Catherine always went to see her, saying she was ill and needed to be visited. Now a child. How wonderful. John completely forgot about the divorce. He quickly found the old house. Hastily locking his car, he ran inside. In the living room, Catherine was sitting by the table, calmly drinking tea, as if she hadn't called, crying in pain. You came, dear? She smiled. John had no time to reply, as he instantly felt a prick in his neck. The last thing he saw was a man's face peeking from behind the curtain. Passed out? Catherine asked roughly. Yeah, he's out, the man replied. You planned it all so well with the pregnancy. Let's pack him up quickly. I'm tired of hiding our love for so many years, pretending to visit an aunt who doesn't even exist anymore. Now all the wealth will be ours, Catherine laughed. Meanwhile, John's vision darkened. A terrible news reached the town. John died in a horrific accident. He was driving on business to a neighboring town and lost control of the car. They would bring him to be buried in a closed casket today. Just died yesterday and already burying today, the townspeople whispered. What an agony for the parents, so poor, to not even see their son one last time. His wife would bring him back. She was in that town, they say. John was going to see her. What a pity. People sincerely grieved over such a tragic and senseless death of a young man. They felt sorry for the parents who had gone grey overnight. By noon, a hearse appeared in the village, with a disconsolate widow sitting beside the coffin. Arriving at John's parents' house, she rushed, sobbing, to his mother and father. What sorrow! Everything is ready. The grave was dug yesterday evening, John's father said with difficulty. Then let's go, Catherine said, wiping her tears. Why prolong the agony? Let's lay him to rest and ease the heart. We must wait for Isabella, John's mother suddenly said. Isabella. Catherine was surprised. Is she here? Is she coming? As soon as she found out, she called me. She wants to say goodbye, John's mother replied. Catherine nervously looked at her watch. How long to wait? The bus arrives in an hour. She's coming with her son from the train. With her son, Catherine muttered through clenched teeth. All right, let her say goodbye. There's nothing for us to share. Soon, Isabella and a boy about 10 years old approached the house. Over the years, Isabella hadn't changed a bit. Still slender, only her large blue eyes reflected deep sorrow. Isabella didn't hide her tears. She still loved John, even though she hadn't been in contact with him all these years. Her son clung to her, fearfully looking at the coffin. Ryan, come to your father. Let's say goodbye, Isabella whispered to the boy. To his father, John's mother heard this and started crying. Isabella, why did you keep silent? Let's not talk about it now, Anna, Isabella sobbed. Catherine, who also heard everything, grabbed Isabella by the hand and pushed her away from the coffin. Get out of here with your bastard. John is mine and only mine. Thinking Catherine wasn't herself from grief, people began to console her. Isabella stepped back, hugging her son tightly. Catherine, you're wrong, was all she said. I don't claim anything. I just love John, and you know that. And he loved me. Loved? Let him burn in hell! Catherine yelled in fury and turned to the coffin. Bury him already! There was a clicking noise from inside the coffin, and then smoke began to billow from under the lid. Everyone distinctly heard the dead man sneeze. People began to flee the cemetery in horror, but not all of them. The parents rushed to the coffin instead. Neighbors rushed to help them. Together, they opened the coffin. John lay there with his hands folded on his chest, alive. He silently gasped for air and looked around in horror as people surrounded him. They lifted John out of the coffin, his parents crying out of intense fear and happiness that their son was alive. The townspeople stood around in confusion, with Isabella and her son among them. No one even noticed how Catherine and her funeral team suddenly disappeared in this chaos. At home, once he had recovered, John told everything he remembered. He heard Catherine and her lover talking. There was no doubt it was her lover. They had been meeting for years. They had love, but no money. The man worked at the local morgue as a pathologist. They had some connections, and therefore when Catherine came to him and told him that her husband intended to leave her with nothing, the plan was quickly formed. Catherine lured her husband to another town. By that time, everything was already prepared. A death certificate, a traffic accident report, and arrangements with the funeral parlor. Finally, they injected another dose of sedative into John and put him in the coffin. Catherine decided to bury John in his hometown, as there could be problems in the city. John remembered how Catherine spoke with her lover, discussing the final details of the plan. They were confident in their success and hadn't expected the coffin to be opened so soon. Catherine deceived everyone, John continued. But why was she in such a hurry? The neighbors wondered. And how can we find her now? For now, the questions remained unanswered. No one understood where Catherine and her lover could have vanished. John speculated that she might reach out to some of her friends or even relatives to hide for a while, but there were few leads so far. This situation seriously disturbed the entire local police department. They had never encountered such a case before. An investigative team immediately began their work, annulled all funeral documents, and declared Catherine a wanted fugitive. While the investigation was underway, John had important matters of his own. He realized that Catherine's mention of Ryan and Isabella wasn't for nothing. Perhaps Catherine had intended to use the child to manipulate or blackmail him. John met with Isabella. After long years of separation, they had a serious conversation. Isabella, I'm sorry it all happened this way. John took her hands. I never knew about the child. Why didn't you tell me? I was afraid, Isabella replied quietly. It seemed to me that you had already filed for divorce long ago, but Catherine just wouldn't sign. Time passed. Yes, that was my mistake. I thought I could at least get my share of the business and leave everything to Catherine if she agreed. But now everything is different. John looked into Isabella's eyes. Now I'll do everything to be with you and our son. She gave a weary smile and hugged him. A month after these events, John received a divorce, and he and Isabella had a beautiful wedding. And 9 months later, they had a daughter. Catherine was found. During the trial, she showed no remorse for what she had done and received the deserved punishment. Did you enjoy this story? Tell us your thoughts in the comments. Give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel to not miss new releases. See you soon.